Hi, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today's video is going to be me trying out 10 different fragrances from 9 different fragrance houses. These are all brand new releases released in 2024 and I'm just going to walk you through each of these, tell you whether they remind me of anything else I've smelt, tell you whether they're something new and different, something exciting, and whether they're worth trying or not. So if you haven't seen me before, I'm Claire Smith. I make videos all about perfume, perfume science, perfume history, perfume psychology, and I also just do some straight perfume reviews and fun perfume tags. So if this kind of thing interests you and you haven't already subscribed, then please do consider subscribing, and please also like this video if you do enjoy this kind of content. So today's video wouldn't be possible without me having been sent these samples by my friends. I'd like to really thank Lizzie at Rose & Jones, John at Scented Snowdrops, M at EMS Heart Notes, and also Kay at Erratic Alien on Instagram. So thank you so much to all those people. I'm going to leave all of their details linked in the description box below, but let's get on with this. What's the first sample? So the first fragrance is one from Dries van Noten. I feel like everybody knows Dries van Noten from their initial collection of 12 fragrances, which included Soie, Malaquais. They've now released an additional set of 5 fragrances in 2024, and the one I'm going to try out in this video is called Vanille Camouflage. So Vanille Camouflage, if you just want a headline, is a green vanilla fragrance, but really opens to me with something that smells like pea shoots. It's very distinctively pea shoots to me, and actually very quickly it turns into a milky fig leaf kind of fragrance. It really makes me think of Alluring Fig by Theodoros Kalotinis in the opening, but really those two fragrances diverged from each other very quickly as the fragrance starts to dry down. It begins to smell more yellowy green rather than green, and I think that's the galbanum just sort of coming in along with the mastic, making it slightly more bitter feeling almost. Really, it's still got a balance because it's got a sweet vanilla in here as well, but it is a green vanilla overall. The vanilla is initially quite milky. It smells almost like the vanilla in a vanilla yogurt, but then as it dries down further it becomes more creamy, and it actually begins to make me think of the dry down of Green Lover by Lolita Lempicka, but with the citrus notes kind of removed. It's very much the same style of vanilla, but several orders of magnitude quieter. This is a very close to skin, very intimate fragrance, and it's something that, while it does last a long time, it's definitely not a loud one. This is not something that's going to knock you out. Really, the loudest part is the green bit at the beginning, but the greenness definitely fades into the dry down. So what did I think of this one? I think, I like it. I don't think it's me, because I think the milkiness sometimes is something that can turn my stomach a little bit, and I did get that kind of feeling at points with this one. I don't think this is something that I'd want to reach for regularly. I think it's an interesting fragrance. I think actually, because of the closeness to Alluring Fig in the opening, I'm quite happy with Alluring Fig because I own a bottle of that one, and I think Alluring Fig is stronger and it's longer lasting, and if that's something that bothers you, that might be a better choice, although clearly it is a very different fragrance, especially in the dry down. I think this one is really quite an expensive fragrance. I think it's over £200 possibly. And whilst it's a beautiful bottle, stunning bottle, I don't think this one's for me. But I could see somebody falling in love with this one because it is quite a different fragrance. So that's Vanille Camouflage by Dries van Noten. So the next fragrance is one from Papillon Artisan Perfumery, and it's called Epona. So Epona is actually the Celtic goddess of horses, ponies and donkeys, and they're the goddess that protects those animals from harm. And this fragrance really reflects the brand owner of Papillon Artisan Perfumery, Liz Moore's love of her horses and being outside with her horses. Papillon Artisan Perfumery is a fragrance brand that I've tried a few from, but there's never really been a fragrance that's grabbed me and made me want to buy it. But I always think their fragrances have an artistry and a storytelling to them, and this one's no exception. It really does tell a story. So this opens with a slightly vintage feeling chypre style. So it opens with oak moss and leather. Quite often Papillon Artisan Perfumery fragrances do have a slightly vintage feel to them, and they also like to use animalics in their fragrances, and again this also has that. So it opens with this kind of chypre, oak moss, leather, but it's also sort of softened a little bit by some sweet powdery violets. And really, as this starts to dry down, you get the sweet powdery violets amping up into something that smells more like a gentle Parma violet kind of smell. Those Parma violet sweets, almost like the insolence kind of Parma violet smell. But that's joined by a very white feeling, very functional feeling, soapiness. So some aldehydes here giving it a little bit of soapiness, but in a quite modern way still. The soapiness with the violet, with the powdery violet, is absolutely my favourite part of this fragrance. In the background still you get the leatheriness, you get the oak moss, but it's the powdery violets and the soapiness that I really absolutely love. And at this point in the fragrance, it really makes me think of horse's breath. It makes me think of horses breathing on me and of their breath kind of misting in the air on a cold morning. Also, this fragrance, in the dry down, it turns a little bit more animalic. It makes me think of actually being in a stable with a horse. It makes me think of the smell of their bedding and the smell of their skin. And it really has a texture almost of the horse's coat, the kind of the hairiness of being near a horse. I think this fragrance is just really artistic, and I can really see that it's got the storytelling here. It really makes me think of horses, and I think if you really like horses, if you really like being around horses, you would absolutely love this fragrance. And whilst this one isn't for me, even though I really love and appreciate the midsection, especially of this fragrance, I just think it's a little bit animalic for me, especially in the dry down. But it's just such a great fragrance. It's really long lasting and it really projects as well. I'd really recommend this one, especially if you love horses. So that's Epona. So the next fragrance is one from Guerlain, and it's one from the Absolute Allegoria range, which I don't think I've tried any from actually. So this one's called Rose Amira. So Amira in Arabic translates as princess. So Rose Princess. So I've looked at the notes and I thought, do you know what? This looks like I've smelt it before. And actually when I sprayed it, I thought, yes, I have smelt this before. So on initial spray, it smells kind of sparkly, the rose. It smells almost like a Typh rose, just for the first few seconds. And really, on initial spray, I thought immediately of Nina Ricci L'Extase Rose Absolue, which is a fragrance that I own. But really, that feeling didn't stay for very long. It was just the first few seconds, and then it went more into a drier, more dusty rose. And it's something that felt quite red and almost like it was spiced. So it felt more like Love by Chopard, which itself is similar or along similar lines to Portrait of a Lady. I'd say it's not as dark or deep or foreboding as Portrait of a Lady, this fragrance. It's definitely on the lighter side, but Chopard Love, I think it did remind me of that fragrance. This one though, it just has this kind of dustiness that makes me think of geranium, or makes me think of something earthy. Maybe it's some part of the patchouli, or maybe some part of the musk in this fragrance, or maybe even a spice. There's something dry and dusty here. There's also some resins, and I'd say the resins are noticed initially, but really they're very much background in the rest of the fragrance. There's something that I don't really feel other than a dryness really in the fragrance. Also, as this dries down, it becomes more musky, you get more of the patchouli, and the rose really fades. It becomes less bright, the rose, not that it was very bright to begin with. I think this fragrance really makes me think of something that's autumn, winter rather than a spring, summer kind of rose. It's definitely not a light, sweet rose. I think this fragrance is just something that doesn't excite me. I don't feel like I want to reach for this. It doesn't make me want to grab it and wear it again. I've just smelt this so many times before, and whilst it's quite long lasting, I felt like it was quite close to skin. It wasn't a super strong fragrance, this one. And I just don't think this is worth spending the money it is on it, even though it's Guerlain, even though clearly the quality is there. I've just smelt this before. So that's Rose Amira by Guerlain. So the next fragrance is one from Chanel, and this is from the Les Exclusives range, which is the sort of the higher priced range. This is Comète. So Comète is a fragrance that I tried in store a few months back, and I was just really pleased to get a sample from Lizzie, because I think trying at home, you smell more things, don't you? It's just a nicer experience to try a fragrance at home than it is to try a fragrance in store where there are other smells around. You really smell and experience the fragrance very differently to trying a fragrance in store, and it's always a more true reflection of how a bottle might smell to you. So when I sprayed this finally after I got the sample, I really got a strong hit of a really powdery iris and also a powdery heliotrope, but the heliotrope is more along the lines of something creamier with some almond, but also just with this kind of cherry pie kind of sweetness to it. There's also an indolic feeling floral in the background, and actually I had no clue what this was, but it's listed as cherry blossom, and that makes a lot of sense because I don't think cherry blossom is something I smell a lot of in fragrances, so me not recognising it would be, you know, logical, wouldn't it? I think this fragrance, as well, as this begins to dry down, has this kind of pastel feeling cherry scent to it. It makes me think of a cherry boiled sweet that's been coated in layers and layers of icing sugar and also corn flour, so that the cherry smell is kind of muffled almost. But it's really the powderiness that strikes me about this, the powdery sweetness that really stands out. As this dries down, it doesn't change too much. It perhaps becomes a little bit more irisy, a little bit less on the cherry side, but there still is that cherry feeling underneath everything. It also feels a bit more golden somehow, and also you get some aldehydes creeping in as this dries down. I think this fragrance is just really super pretty overall, and it's something that really makes me think of those pastel coloured adverts that you get from Kayali. Instead of like the green for the pistachio gelato adverts, you might get something that's kind of pink or purple or even an aquamarine kind of pastel colour. It really feels quite ethereal and something that's quite friendly almost, really, for Chanel. Chanel, to me, is something that I think a lot of people, especially in younger age brackets, are put off by. And I really feel like trying Comète might be a way in, because it is just really sweet and really friendly and really kind of ethereal and fun feeling in a way. I would say this one's on the softer side. It's something that's quite close to skin on me, and it's something that doesn't project too much. I think it's quite long lasting though. I think the thing for me about this is that it just doesn't really move on. It's definitely not my favourite from the Les Exclusives line, and it wouldn't be the one that I would choose, but I do think this is really, really, truly pretty and a really lovely fragrance. So that's Comète by Chanel. So the next fragrance is one from Miller Harris, and this was a fragrance I was really intrigued to try since it came out. I think it came out just before the summer, but I really think this is the time for this fragrance. So it's called Soufflot or Soufflot. I'm really not sure how to pronounce this. I just think this is a very now fragrance. It smells like autumn to me. It smells like pumpkin spices. It smells like, yeah, like baked goods almost in an oven, you know, some kind of wintry dessert to me. So this opens with some spices, most distinctively nutmeg, but also it smells like almost like a nutty brittle almost, you know, some nuts in some caramel or some toffee or something like that, something that you can break up, a thin layer of nuts in caramel. Really, as this dries down, it makes me weirdly think of caramelised apple slices covered in a pastry and perhaps also covered in this caramel and some nuts. It really has a very gourmand feel to this. Also, it becomes a little bit more powdery. It becomes even suede-y to me, this fragrance. It has a definite kind of woodiness to this fragrance too. The spices become a lot more complex. There are other things going on here. I'm not quite sure exactly of which spices are here, but there's definitely more than just the nutmeg as this dries down. Also, I get a kind of Baccarat Rouge style thing going on in this fragrance, but it's not exactly like Baccarat Rouge. So in Baccarat Rouge, you get that kind of ambroxan and ethyl maltol, giving you that dentist surgery, dental practice, medical practice, doctor surgery kind of feel. Here you've got honey replacing the ethyl maltol and something called orchanox, which I'd never heard of. And that to me just has this kind of woody smell, and that really takes over in the dry down. Really, a lot of the gourmand feel to this fragrance is lost in the dry down. You just get left with a sweetness, a spiciness, and that kind of orchanox, along with that kind of dental surgery feel. I just think this fragrance has a very kind of split personality from the opening to the end of the fragrance. I really like the opening of this fragrance. I really like the nuttiness. I really like the caramelised feel. But the dry down with that Baccarat Rouge style thing going on was just not for me. Really long lasting though, and something that really does project. It's really quite a strong fragrance overall. So that's Soufflot or Soufflot by Miller Harris. So the next fragrance is one from Le Cachemire Parfums, and Le Cachemire Parfums are a brand that I've absolutely loved trying fragrances from so far. I tried Piano Santal, loved it. Bouquet Encore, loved it so much I bought a bottle. And so this is the third fragrance I've tried from them, and it's called Mono Cachemire. So Mono Cachemire, when I first sprayed it, it was instant recognition for two fragrances. So firstly, it reminded me very much of the original formulation of Glossier You. I used to own a bottle of that fragrance. It's perhaps a little bit more ambretty than Glossier You, but it's along the same lines. It also very distinctively made me think of Fleur de Peau. And I think it's actually closer to Fleur de Peau because Fleur de Peau is based around ambrette more so than Glossier You is. Really, all of these fragrances are much of a muchness. They're very much your skin but better kind of fragrances, and they have a huge fan base. But I think if you've tried one, you kind of know what the others smell like because they are all quite similar. This one, to me, has some supporting notes. So as well as the ambrette, it has the iris in the beginning, but it also has ambroxan in the beginning. And then as it dries down, it has more of a cashmere feel. I think this one's really prettily done. You don't expect a beast mode fragrance with this kind of scent profile. You expect something close to skin. You expect something quite intimate. But this one lasted a long time on my skin, and I was really pleased to try this. Even though it's not something I'm going to rush out and buy because I could go out and buy Glossier You for less than half the price, I do think it's a really beautiful fragrance. And I think if you haven't tried this scent profile before, you could fall in love with this one. So that's Mono Cachemire by Parfums. So the next fragrance is one from Olfactive O, and Olfactive O are a brand that just fly under everybody's radar. I hardly ever see them mentioned on YouTube apart from by John and Scented Snowdrops, and I can see why he loves them because they're just so reasonably priced. They're £65 for 50ml, and they're really good. I don't see why they're not more popular. Harvey Nichols has even picked up this brand and still nobody seems to mention them. I just think it's crazy. Anyway, less of that. I tried Citrus from Olfactive O. I've tried loads of their other fragrances, and in actual fact they've released another one subsequently. I think they released a new fragrance on the 28th of October. Haven't tried that one yet, but this one also was released in 2024. So Citrus is something that I generally don't gravitate towards. This wouldn't be a fragrance name that would make me run and try it. But I would say with this fragrance, I did really enjoy it. So this opens with a yellowy green feeling citrus. There's bergamot, but there's also some grapefruit. And really, there's some effervescence here as well. So it actually smells a little bit appley to me. And I think there's champagne listed. So I don't know whether that's why I'm getting a kind of effervescent apple kind of smell from this. As this dries down, it becomes muskier, but it also does have some light woods, some light spices to it, but really it's a musky citrus fragrance overall. And the thing that I find joyous about this fragrance is that it doesn't have any detectable ambroxan to me. And I love that because citrus fragrances are often ruined for me by ambroxan. I really do like this one. I think it's really happy feeling and bright and really summery. I think it's really uplifting, exuberant. It's long lasting, it projects, and it's one of the nicest citrus fragrances I've tried in a long time. So that's Olfactive O Citrus. So the next fragrance is one from Kajal, and Kajal really are a brand that are famous for the fragrance Lamar, aren't they? I think a lot of people would perhaps struggle to name a second fragrance from Kajal, but actually they have a load of fragrances. I've tried quite a few of them thanks to John, and this one was one that I was intrigued by because Kajal are a brand that I generally don't get along with, but there are the occasional fragrance that I really do enjoy and love. For example, I really like Yasmina from Kajal. So the fragrance that was released this year that I'm going to try is called I Can, and this fragrance is just super fruity. A lot of Kajal fragrances are very, very fruity, and this is no exception. It's just really in your face, pineapple and also some passion fruit in the beginning. The pineapple dominates to begin with, and then the passion fruit really takes over after a very short while. Really, there's also a little bit of caramel here, and it's the kind of caramel that I always feel like it smells a bit like artificial sweetener to me. And that really is it. It's passion fruit through and through with this kind of caramelized artificial sweetener, but also with a ton of ambroxan. It's a really loud, punchy, fruity fragrance, this. And I think if you like fragrances like Herba Pura or the dupes like Rosati's Jasmine Wisp, then you might like this. It's that kind of gummy bear, sweety fruitiness, the artificial fruitiness that you get in those kinds of fragrances. This is just not for me. This is just, it makes me think of clubbing. This is a clubbing fragrance. This is something that you'd wear to go out when you want to get noticed and when you want other people, perhaps the entire room, to smell you. It's super strong, and it actually makes me think of Alcopops in the 2000s. It takes me back to nights out when you perhaps drink something that you weren't familiar with, when you perhaps, regret your choices in the morning after, when you perhaps stayed at somebody's house that you didn't intend to stay at, when you were perhaps, you've got those kind of spilt Alcopops on your clothes that you put back on after a shower. You've perhaps showered in somebody else's shower gel. You've used their Lynx or their Axe shower gel, and you've got that kind of background smell on you as well as the fruity Alcopops. It's either a very good night out or a very bad night out, depending upon your point of view with this fragrance. But this one just isn't for me. So that's Kurkdjian's I Can. So the next fragrance is one from One Way Bridge, which are a small New Zealand brand, and the perfumer Elise works both as a perfumer but also as a carer in a dementia care home. And she's created a fragrance called Forgotten Highway, which is meant to reflect the patient's past lives, but also their present sense of being. So this fragrance, I find it really hard to describe because Elise tends to use things that are very particular to New Zealand in her fragrances. And so I have to kind of describe it in terms of things that I know rather than what these things actually are, because to me, I don't know how whatever note she's listed actually smells. So to me, this opens with something quite herbal, but it's also quite sweet. It smells almost honeyed. The herbalness to me smells something along the lines of lavender, but it's more aromatic than that. It smells almost like there's maybe some tea tree or some rosemary, but it's very, very soft still. As this dries down, it has more texture. It becomes denser, it becomes muskier, and it becomes somehow a little bit gourmand. It smells like food somehow. I don't know what food, but there's some kind of food here. And really, as this dries down further, you get some bubbliness, some soapiness, but it also becomes a little bit muskier as well in the dry down, but still with all those other smells. I just think this one is really unusual. That's usually the word that I say with Elise's fragrances, because it's always something I've never ever smelt before and I'll never smell again. Elise's fragrances, if you want to smell different, if you want to smell like nobody else and have people asking you what that is, Elise's fragrances are where it's at. This one isn't my favourite for sure, but I think this is something that's grown on me the more I've worn it. I think initially I just felt like it was quite fougere almost, and it really isn't. It's really quite a sweet fragrance overall. It's not really a fougere in general. It's a musky lavender kind of style fragrance, but it definitely doesn't have that kind of sharpness that fougères have, that kind of ferny kind of bitterness. It's along the lines of something sweeter. This was really long lasting on me, and it was really quite strong as well. I think Elise's other creations are higher up on my list, but I did really enjoy this one. I really enjoyed trying this fragrance. So that's Forgotten Highway by One Way Bridge. So the final fragrance is one from Guerlain, and this one's called Neroli Plein Sud. So Guerlain just seem to release a lot of fragrances per year, don't they? So there's always another Guerlain to try. And this one, I really wasn't that fussed about trying because it's got neroli in the name, and neroli is really not one of my favourite notes. But actually, upon trying this, it really wasn't, that oven cleaner or really sharp neroli that you get sometimes in fragrances. This was actually quite soft, and it was really tempered by orange blossom. So initially, it is very fresh, and it does feel, you do sense neroli, but it's really not sharp at all. And then as it dries down, you get this kind of dusty feeling. And I was looking at the notes, and it says turmeric's listed. And turmeric is what I get from this. It's kind of yellow feeling, earthy, but still quite gentle and dusty. Really, as this dries down further, it turns into something that's quite soapy. It really makes me think of those really bulky paper wrap soaps you get at Christmas that are sort of, the French soaps, like the Savon de Marseille, that kind of thing. I think this fragrance really just does smell to me in the dry down like a really luxurious, really kind of lathered soap. It does smell slightly woody, slightly spicy, but really overall it's just soap. I don't think this one's for me, but I do think that this is probably one of the nicer neroli fragrances I've tried. I don't really love soapy fragrances, so this one isn't on my radar, but if you do love soapy fragrances and you like neroli, then this definitely could be for you. So that's Neroli Plein Sud by Guerlain. So that's the final fragrance in this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, then please press the like button and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know which of these fragrances have you tried or which would you like to try? And also, what's the best fragrance that you've tried so far in 2024? I'd love to know your answers. So thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.